There's a strange stillness in staying home, a kind of silence that hums just beneath the noise of ordinary life. At first it feels like confinement. The walls too close, the air too quiet, the mind restless. Yet, somewhere within that stillness, something begins to move, something ancient, something you've been running from, perhaps without even knowing it. And that movement, that quiet stirring beneath the surface, is where your real life begins. Because staying home isn't merely about where your body rests, it's about returning to the home you left behind inside yourself, the home of your own depths. It begins with a discomfort. You feel it first as boredom, maybe even anxiety, the impulse to reach for distraction, to scroll, to talk, to plan, anything to escape that invisible pull inward. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." You can feel that truth vibrating in the emptiness of your room. The moment you stop moving, you begin to sense what's been waiting for you all along the faint echo of your unspoken life. The walls are not your prison. They are mirrors, each reflection a face you've worn for others. The charming mask, the capable one, the achiever, the helper. You begin to see them flicker and dissolve under the soft pressure of solitude. Without an audience, who are you performing for? Without the noise of the world, whose voice do you hear? The persona, Jung called it, the social self you built to survive among others. Necessary, yes, but not the whole story. When the world slows, the persona slips. What remains is raw, uncertain, real. You might not like what you find at first. The shadows gather the old fears, the repressed desires, the griefs you never had time to grieve. They emerge like ghosts at the edges of your awareness, whispering your forgotten truths. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the part of you that holds what you've exiled. Your anger, your envy, your tenderness, your wildness. Staying home, in this sense, means staying with yourself long enough to see what you've hidden. At first, it hurts. The confrontation feels like falling backward into dark water. You struggle, searching for light, for air, for escape. But if you stop fighting, if you allow yourself to sink, something extraordinary happens. The darkness begins to breathe with you. The water no longer suffocates, it holds. You begin to see faint shapes, moving beneath the surface, images from dreams, fragments of memory, forgotten sensations. This is the unconscious world Jung spoke of. Not a dungeon, but a vast inner cosmos, teeming with symbols and meaning. You realize, with a quiet shock, that you are larger than you imagined. The boundaries of yourself dissolve, and you sense that everything you feared, everything you've avoided, is not separate from you at all. It's you, the lover and the lonely, the saint and the liar, the child and the cynic. The unconscious doesn't judge. It holds opposites in balance, and for the first time you feel the possibility of wholeness. You start to understand why solitude was always sacred, why mystics withdrew from the world not to escape it, but to rediscover it from within. Staying home is an initiation, a descent into your own underworld. And like all true descents, it demands that something die so that something more alive can be born. As you sit in the quiet, the noise of your old identity fades. You begin to notice smaller things, the hum of your own breath, the play of light across the wall, the pulse of your heart as it slows. The silence is no longer empty. It's full alive with presence. You realize that the outer world, for all its movement, was only ever an echo of this deeper one. When you look around your room now, it doesn't seem smaller, it seems infinite, because your attention has changed. And attention is the doorway to the soul. Jung once wrote that Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. In the quiet of your own home, you feel what that means, not as philosophy, but as experience. Looking inside is not an intellectual act, it's a surrender, the kind that humbles you, strips you bare, and brings you face to face with a strange, luminous intelligence that animates your life from beneath consciousness. In this light, staying home becomes something else entirely. It's not a retreat from life, it's an act of courage. To sit with your own chaos until it reveals its pattern. To listen to your own silence until it begins to sing. To love your own darkness until it stops frightening you. And maybe as you wander through these inner rooms, you start to see others differently too. You begin to sense that every person is carrying their own invisible house, their own labyrinth of dreams and wounds. You start to forgive more easily, to listen more deeply, to recognize that every act of cruelty is a symptom of someone's disowned shadow. You start to feel the great web connecting all things, and that's when you realize you never had to leave home to find the world. The world was already here inside you, waiting to be seen. The walls dissolve, the boundaries blur. You are not alone. You are not separate. You are, in some mysterious way, both the dreamer and the dream. The silence, once unbearable, becomes sacred. The solitude, once heavy, becomes freedom. And in that stillness you begin to understand the secret hidden in all great psychological journeys. The way out is through. Through the shadow, through the stillness, through the heart of your own being, until what you once called home is no longer a place at all, but a state of awareness. You have not escaped the world. You have entered it fully. There comes a moment when the silence shifts. It's not quieter, it's deeper. The air thickens, the light grows softer, and something in you begins to open that had been shut for years. You realize this stillness, this act of staying home, has drawn you into the hidden architecture of your psyche. The walls around you are no longer plaster and paint. They are the boundaries of consciousness itself. You are inside your own mind, wandering through the rooms of memory and myth. There is one room you've avoided, the one with the locked door. You felt its presence in your chest, the heaviness, the ache, the vague sense that something lives there, waiting to be seen. You stand before it now, trembling a little. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, the necessary descent into what we've denied. The parts of you that were too intense, too tender, too inconvenient to show the world. You place your hand on the doorknob. It's cold. For a moment you hesitate, and then you turn it. The door opens, not to horror, but to truth. There, sitting quietly in the half-light, are the fragments of your unlived life. The musician who stopped playing, the lover who never spoke, the child who was never allowed to cry. Their eyes meet yours, not with accusation, but with recognition. You understand then that the shadow isn't darkness itself, it's the light you refuse to see. When you step closer, the air hums with memory. You see the moments when you chose silence instead of expression, performance instead of presence, the ways you've edited yourself for approval, the ways you've hidden love because it felt too vulnerable. You see it all, and you feel, maybe for the first time, that your wholeness depends not on perfection but on integration. The parts you once called flaws begin to shimmer. You kneel beside your shadow, not to defeat it, but to listen. It speaks in symbols, in images, not words. A cracked mirror, a hand reaching through fog, a house submerged in water. These images arise from the depths of the unconscious, the great sea beneath thought. Jung believed this is where the soul communicates not through logic, but through metaphor. You begin to understand what the symbols mean, not intellectually, but viscerally. The mirror is the self you've avoided seeing. The fog is confusion before clarity. The submerged house, that's you, waiting to rise. This is the work of individuation, not becoming someone new, but remembering who you are beneath the personas and projections. It's the quiet miracle of returning to yourself. And as you sit in that room with your shadow, you notice another presence watching from the doorway. Softer, subtler, the opposite, yet the complement. The anima if you are masculine, the animus if you are feminine. Jung described them as the inner, contrasexual soul images, the divine twin who lives within you. They appear in dreams and intuitions, guiding you toward balance. You sense them not as a person, but as a feeling and inner knowing, the voice that whispers when reason falters. You realize that love, the kind that transforms, doesn't come from another person first. It begins here, in the marriage between your inner opposites, between logic and feeling, between control and surrender. When these opposites reconcile, the psyche breathes again. The world inside you expands. Dreams begin to speak in full sentences. You wake with symbols etched into your awareness, a river that flows uphill, a bird made of fire, a mirror that reflects the stars instead of your face. Each image a message, each night a descent into the myth of your own becoming. You start to understand why Jung said dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. They show you the film playing beneath your waking life, the unseen script directing your choices, your fears, your longings. Staying home has turned you into your own archaeologist. You brush the dust from forgotten symbols and begin to see how every decision, every heartbreak, every coincidence was part of a larger pattern. You were never lost. You were being shaped. The stillness you once resented has become sacred ground. You sit with your coffee, sunlight pooling across the floor, and realize you are not the same person who first sought distraction in the silence. Something in you has softened. Your eyes see differently now, not just what's visible, but what's invisible beneath it. The way someone's laugh hides sorrow. The way your own heart breaks open and expands. The way beauty and pain coexist, inseparable. You sense, faintly, the self, the archetype Jung described as the organizing principle of the psyche. It's not a thing you can grasp, but a presence that holds you. It feels like standing in the center of your own life, no longer pulled apart by fragments, a still point in the turning chaos, the center of the mandala. And as you sit in that center, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel gratitude, not the polite kind, but the fierce gratitude that arises when you realize your suffering was a teacher. That the loneliness was not punishment, but initiation. That the silence you feared was the doorway through which your soul could finally speak. You understand now that staying home, staying with yourself, was never about withdrawal. It was the path inward, so that one day you could return outward with depth. The world doesn't need another mask. It needs people who have met their own depths and returned whole. People who've looked into their shadow and found light enough to guide others through theirs. In that realization, your chest opens. The breath moves differently, slower, fuller, freer. You are still at home, but now the home feels infinite. You can almost sense the world breathing with you. The trees outside, the wind, the stars, everything is connected by this invisible pulse of awareness that you've rediscovered within yourself. You look around your room once more, the same objects, the same silence. Yet now, everything glows faintly with meaning. The ordinary has become sacred. The home you thought you were trapped in has become your temple. And in that temple, the soul speaks in a voice both familiar and eternal. You are not what happens to you. You are what awakens through it. Time begins to blur. The hours fold into each other like waves folding back into the sea. You are still at home, but the meaning of home has changed entirely. It no longer points to a place with walls and furniture, but to a vast interior landscape, fluid, luminous, alive. The outer world hums softly in the distance, but you are no longer haunted by its noise. You have found the stillness beneath the stillness. The psyche, Jung said, is like nature. It seeks balance, not perfection. And in the balance you found, something beautiful begins to unfold. You start to see your life not as a linear story, but as a mandala, a circular dance of opposites, chaos weaving harmony, endings birthing beginnings. You recognize the rhythm of it in everything, in your breath, in your grief, in the way the moon disappears only to return. This is what Jung called individuation, the lifelong unfolding of the self. It is not a destination, but a relationship between the conscious and the unconscious, the known and the unknown. You begin to live in dialogue with your own depths. Every feeling becomes a messenger, every dream a teacher. You no longer run from discomfort, because you've learned it carries something you need to know. You start to walk differently, not literally, but psychically. There's a quiet confidence, not born from certainty, but from intimacy with mystery. You've met your shadow and realized it bleeds light. You've encountered your inner opposite and felt the birth of wholeness. And now, as you stand in the center of yourself, you sense a new kind of courage emerging, not the kind that conquers, but the kind that listens. The courage to remain present with the truth of what is. Sometimes that truth is tender, sometimes it's brutal, but always it's yours. You begin to realize that staying home, truly staying, was an act of love, not self-indulgence, but self-encounter. You faced what most spend lifetimes avoiding. You stopped chasing the world long enough for the world within you to reveal itself, and what it revealed was not weakness, but wonder. You are both the dreamer and the dreamed, the question and the answer, the wound and the healer. Every day now feels like a conversation between your inner and outer worlds. The sound of rain is no longer just weather, it's the unconscious speaking in rhythm. The scent of morning coffee is an invocation. Even silence carries texture. You start to sense meaning everywhere, not because the world changed, but because you did. You understand now that meaning isn't given, it's made. And in that realization, you rediscover a forgotten kind of freedom. The freedom not to escape life, but to meet it fully even when it breaks you open, especially then, because staying home has taught you the oldest secret in psychology. Transformation is not about becoming something different. It's about becoming who you already are, beneath the noise, beneath the masks, beneath the borrowed expectations. The self was never lost, only hidden under the rubble of habit and fear. When you see this clearly, you begin to move differently through the world. You carry stillness like a lantern. You speak less but mean more. You notice beauty where before there was only routine, the pattern of light on the wall, the way someone's laughter bends time, the small mercy of being alive. You no longer fear solitude. You've made peace with your own company. You've learned to sit with silence until it begins to hum like a familiar song. You realize now that staying home was not an interruption of your life, it was the beginning of your real one. And perhaps you start to wonder, what if the world's chaos was always an invitation? What if every forced pause, every heartbreak, every quiet night was conspiring to bring you here to this intimacy with your own soul? You think of all the times you ran from discomfort, only to find that the running was what hurt the most. You think of how the shadow you feared turned out to be the guardian of your gifts. You think of how, in facing yourself, you discovered everyone else too, because we are all fragments of the same vast psyche, dreaming together. This realization brings a new tenderness. You begin to look at others not as strangers, but as mirrors, each carrying their own shadow, their own buried light. You start to sense the invisible thread connecting all suffering, all hope. Compassion ceases to be an idea. It becomes instinct. You remember Jung's words, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You feel those words not as philosophy, but as blood in your veins. Enlightenment was never about ascending. It was about descending into the depths, into the soil of being, where life renews itself. And when you finally return to the outer world, to noise, to people, to motion, you carry the stillness with you. You no longer seek meaning outside yourself, because you found the source within. You move through the world as if it were your own reflection. Every encounter becomes sacred. Every act, however small, ripples through the unseen. You have become the home you once sought. The journey ends where it began, in the quiet room, the breath, the heartbeat. Yet now everything has changed. The walls that once confined now protect. The silence that once frightened now nourishes. The solitude that once felt empty now feels full. You sit in the same chair, beneath the same window, but your gaze carries galaxies. This is the paradox. Jung understood that, to find the self, you must lose the world for a while. You must stay home long enough for the soul to speak. You must learn to see not with your eyes, but with the heart that beats beneath thought. And when you finally stand and open the door, stepping back into the world, you realize you never truly left home. You carry it with you in your breath. Your seeing, your being. Every shadow reveals its hidden light. Every wound whispers how it wants to heal. Every descent into confusion carries an ascent toward clarity. And in this quiet moment you understand, staying home was never about isolation. It was about remembering where you truly live.
What if the love you've been taught to seek is not love at all, but a shield, a veil over something more frightening than heartbreak, the silence inside you when no one is there to fill it? You call it longing, connection, partnership. But what if it is simply the fear of meeting yourself without distractions? What if every search for the one has been a clever avoidance of the truth that there is no one who can live your life for you? You can feel it when the noise fades, when the phone goes silent. The house is still, and your own breathing is the loudest thing in the room. That unease, that subtle ache in the chest, is not loneliness. It is your soul reminding you that you have been absent from yourself, and it asks the one question you spend years avoiding: whose life have you been living? Jung once invited us to imagine the end. Not the romantic kind, not the poetic fade to black, but the real one, your body still, your mind loosening its grip on time, the air heavier than it has ever been. In that final quiet, there is a whisper, one you cannot ignore. Did you live as you, or as the echo of someone else's desire? From the moment you were old enough to understand stories, they gave you the script. Find someone, be chosen, build together, share a bed until your last day. It sounds noble, almost holy. It sounds like safety, but no one tells you what dies along the way. The dreams you set aside for the relationship, the truths you don't speak to keep the peace, the edges you sand down until your own reflection no longer recognizes you. Jung understood that the path toward becoming yourself, what he called individuation, demands a solitude most people cannot bear. Not because solitude is inherently cruel, but because it forces you to face the shadow you've been hiding from. That side of you that doesn't smile for the photos, that refuses to compromise when your spirit knows better, that remembers who you were before you learned to perform. Society calls such people selfish. It tells them no one can be happy alone. It repeats the gospel of the couple that the only wholeness worth having is the one you find in another's arms. But what if that is not truth? What if the deeper betrayal is abandoning yourself in order to be loved? This is not a declaration against love. It is a call to choose the only love that can survive all others, the love of your own becoming, the kind that is willing to walk into deserts without a guide, without a hand to hold, because the truth you're after cannot be found in company. You were taught that being single is a pause, an incomplete state waiting to be filled, that the absence of a partner is a flaw, a deficiency, a sign that something in you is broken. But maybe the opposite is true. Maybe it is the need to attach to immediately bind yourself to another that signals a wound covered with the soft fabric of romance, but still open, still unhealed. Jung saw that most people do not love, they cling. They use the other as a mirror they can control, a way to avoid the unpredictability of meeting their own depths. They confuse possession with intimacy, dependence with devotion, and slowly, they trade their individuality for the comfort of not having to face themselves in the raw. It begins so subtly you barely notice. You adjust a belief so you don't argue. You swallow a desire so you don't disrupt. You change a habit and call it maturity. But somewhere in that process, the voice inside you, the one that knows your real name, starts to fade. And you wake one day to find you have been replaced by a persona, a socially acceptable character built to keep love intact, even at the expense of your truth. Jung did not despise love. He despised surrender, the surrender of the inner fire that makes you unique. Romantic ideals ask for fusion, for two to become one. But in that merging, the creative chaos, the raw material of the soul, can vanish, and what remains is a quiet, well-decorated cage. Being alone demands courage because it removes every excuse. There is no one to blame for your stagnation, no one to soothe you when your own shadow rises, no distraction from the raw fact of your existence. This is why so many rush into relationships not out of joy, but out of the terror of unmediated self-awareness. Jung warned of the projections that keep us blind. Everything we deny in ourselves, we seek in another. Our tenderness, our ambition, our daring handed over, outsourced, so we can feel them safely at a distance. But in doing so, we fracture. We become dependent on someone else to carry pieces of us that we refuse to claim. True love does not require you to erase yourself. It does not demand the dimming of your light to protect someone's comfort. The love Jung valued began not in finding a match, but in finding the courage to live without one until you are so complete within yourself that no one's presence can become your crutch. You may feel the pull of that truth even now, a restlessness beneath the skin, a sense that the life you are living was built more for approval than for authenticity. You may have noticed that in moments of genuine solitude, no phone, no background noise, no planned escape, your mind begins to stir differently. Thoughts deepen, memories surface, your shadow comes to sit beside you. And in that moment, you stand on the edge of the most important choice you will ever make. Will you step into yourself, or will you reach again for the nearest distraction? Solitude is not a punishment. It is the ground on which your real self grows roots. It is the silence in which your inner voice stops whispering and begins to speak. It is the crucible in which you are no longer half of something, but whole on your own. To stand there willingly is to break a spell, the spell of cultural hypnosis that tells you belonging is more important than being. To stay there long enough is to realize that the emptiness you feared was never emptiness at all. It was space, space for you to unfold, unhurried, unfiltered, unapproved. And here is the paradox: once you have lived that way, once you have known yourself at that depth, you will no longer seek a partner to complete you. You may choose love again, but not because you need it. You will love as a whole being, not a half. And that, Jung would say, is the only love worth giving or receiving. The journey there is not glamorous. It does not look good on social media. It will not be met with applause, but it will be the truest thing you ever do. And so, you stand before the threshold, aware that stepping through means shedding more than relationships. It means dismantling identities you've worn for years, the ones that made you palatable, the ones that made you acceptable, the ones that convinced you that safety was the highest form of living. You may think the first thing you will lose in solitude is love, but it's not. The first thing you lose is the constant feedback loop that tells you who you are. The nods of approval, the quiet affirmations, the little corrections that shape you subtly every day. And without them, you feel unmoored, like a boat cut from its dock, drifting into open water where the horizon is too far to see. Most people turn back here. The silence feels too wide. The absence of reflection feels like erasure. But Jung knew this is where you begin to see the persona for what it is, that carefully constructed mask designed to win belonging. It is the you that you've shown to lovers, friends, employers, strangers, a version optimized for acceptance, not truth. And when solitude removes the audience, the mask begins to dissolve. What's left beneath it is unsettling at first. You will meet impulses you've ignored, dreams you abandoned, griefs you postponed. Your shadow will step out of the dark, not as a monster, but as the parts of you exiled by your own self-image. You'll feel its weight. You'll see its scars. You'll hear it ask why you chose to hide it in order to be loved. The shadow does not come to destroy you, it comes to complete you. But most people treat it like an intruder, barricading themselves behind distractions and relationships, as if being alone with these truths would be unbearable. Jung saw that those who cannot face their own shadow are destined to project it, seeing in others the flaws, desires, and fears they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. It is why lovers idealize each other in the beginning and resent each other in the end. The qualities they adored were their own disowned treasures. The traits they now hate are their own denied darkness. Solitude strips away that projection. There is no one to carry your unlived life for you, no one to receive your misplaced blame. In the mirror of solitude, every feature is yours, every strength, every failure, every longing. At first, this self-confrontation feels like loss, the loss of the comforting illusion that someone else will make sense of you. But then something begins to shift. In the stillness, your attention turns inward, and you discover there is a dialogue happening within you that is richer than any conversation you've had out there. It is the dialogue between your conscious mind and the vast sea of the unconscious, a territory Jung devoted his life to exploring. Dreams rise from that depth, bringing images and symbols that bypass logic and speak in the language of the soul. They are not mere fantasies, but messages, invitations to reclaim parts of yourself you have forgotten. In them, you may see figures who frighten you, landscapes that feel strangely familiar, or encounters that seem impossible. Jung would say these are aspects of your psyche, each carrying a piece of the self you have yet to integrate. Here, in this inner terrain, you begin to notice the anima or animus, the inner counterpart to your outer identity. If you live as a man, you meet the feminine within intuition, receptivity, emotional depth. If you live as a woman, you meet the masculine within will, clarity, decisive strength. You realize that much of your longing for the other has been a longing for this inner opposite, the part of you left undeveloped because you sought it in someone else's arms. The more you converse with these inner figures, the less desperate you feel for external completion. You see that relationships can enrich your life, but they cannot fill the places in you that you've abandoned. That is your work, your privilege, your liberation. And yet, there is a price. To live from this wholeness means you will be less controllable. You will no longer bend easily to fit another's ideal. You will be accused of being distant, unyielding, even arrogant, because you will not pretend to be less than you are for the sake of comfort, theirs or yours. But this is where the real paradox of freedom appears. Once you can be alone without fear, you are finally capable of love without chains, because you do not need the other to prop you up. You can see them clearly not as a savior or a threat, but as another complete being walking their own path. There is no grasping, no clinging, no covert bargain of, "I will give you what you want if you give me what I need." Love then becomes what it should have been all along, the meeting of two whole people, not the fusion of two halves. You begin to understand why Jung saw solitude not as an escape from love, but as its foundation. Without it, love collapses into dependency. With it, love becomes the free choice of one who could walk alone, but chooses to walk alongside without fear of losing themselves. And so the threshold remains before you. But now you see it differently. It is no longer the entrance to isolation, but the entrance to sovereignty. You are not giving up connection. You are reclaiming your ability to connect without self-erasure. You are not renouncing intimacy. You are rejecting the counterfeit intimacy that demands your identity as payment. The path beyond this point is not for everyone. Many will turn back to the warmth of belonging, even if it costs them their essence. But if you step forward, you step into the rare territory where a human being becomes indivisible, where your self is no longer negotiable. The air changes once you cross that unseen boundary. It is not louder or softer, not warmer or colder, but different, as if you've stepped outside the atmosphere you've been breathing your entire life. Here, no one tells you who to be. No one corrects your posture, your tone, your choices. It is intoxicating for a moment, then terrifying. Because when the outer scripts vanish, you discover just how dependent you were on them. You had thought you wanted freedom, but freedom comes with a silence that asks, if no one is watching, if no one approves or disapproves, who are you now? This is the place where the mind will try to invent new cages. It will seek new rules, new identities, new bonds to replace the old ones, anything to fill the raw openness. But if you resist that urge, if you can stand in that open space without running to clothe it in structure, something ancient begins to stir. Jung called it the self, the organizing center of the psyche, deeper than the ego, older than your conscious life. It is not the self you post online or protect in conversation. It is the pattern of wholeness you were born with, the blueprint that includes your shadow, your persona, your anima or animus, your conscious and unconscious mind. The ego resists this center because it cannot control it. The self moves according to laws the mind doesn't write. In solitude, the voice of the self grows clearer. It does not shout commands or dictate to-do lists. It sends impulses, images, a pull toward what nourishes you and a subtle recoil from what drains you. It asks you to honor the parts of yourself that the persona edited out. And the more you listen, the more you realize how much of your life was lived in service to an image rather than a truth. Relationships, when built on that image, become theaters. Each person plays their part, delivering lines rehearsed since childhood. One plays the caretaker, the other the dreamer. One plays the rescuer, the other the rescued. But when you begin to integrate the shadow and reclaim the self, you drop the role and the play begins to collapse. This is why deep inner work often disrupts existing bonds. You can no longer pretend to need rescuing if you have rescued yourself. You cannot keep performing gratitude for someone who puts up with your complexity when you have accepted it as part of your wholeness. You cannot be the fixed point for another's identity when you are in motion toward your own. And so, solitude becomes not just the absence of others, but the refusal to play roles that cost you your reality. You stop negotiating your essence. You stop explaining your hunger for silence. You stop apologizing for the ways your truth makes other people uncomfortable. At first, this can make you seem hard, even cold, because the warmth you used to project outward to keep the peace is now turned inward to keep yourself alive. But in time, This warmth changes quality. It is no longer the conditional warmth of someone who needs you to stay close. It is the steady heat of someone who can stand by the fire alone and therefore can share it freely without fear of losing it. In Jung's eyes, this is what individuation looks like, the slow and deliberate movement toward a psyche that is whole, integrated, not dependent on another to feel complete. It is the moment when love ceases to be an escape from yourself and becomes the meeting point of two sovereign beings. You might wonder why so few people reach this place. The truth is, the path is lined with losses that feel, for a time, unbearable. Not just the loss of people, but the loss of illusions. The illusion that someone will always be there to absorb your pain. The illusion that your worth is reflected in another's eyes. The illusion that compromise is always virtuous. To let those illusions go is to strip away layers you once believed were your skin. And yet, as they fall away, you find you are not exposed, you are revealed. The self beneath is not fragile, it is not lonely, it is vast, like a sky that does not end at the horizon, but stretches into a depth you cannot measure. There will be nights when you miss the old world, when you crave the easy reassurance of being told who you are, when the silence feels too wide, and you long for someone else's voice to fill it. But these moments pass, and with each passing, you learn that the ache is not for the person or the role you left behind, it is for the familiarity of being known in a way that did not require you to truly be seen. And so the work deepens. You learn to hold the ache without pacifying it. You learn to let the longing burn without extinguishing it in another's arms. You let it teach you what it has always tried to say, that what you are seeking outside is not out there. It is already within you, waiting for the day you have the courage to stop searching. The more you trust that, the less you fear the solitude. In fact, you begin to crave it not because you have turned your back on love, but because you have learned the difference between love and dependency. One nourishes, the other consumes. One frees you, the other binds you. In this space, you realize something radical. You do not have to choose between love and yourself, but if forced, you will always choose yourself not out of selfishness, but out of the understanding that abandoning yourself for love is not love at all. It is here, in the quiet, that you finally see what Jung saw. Remaining single is not the rejection of connection. It is the refusal to betray your own becoming. There is a different kind of strength that grows here, not the hardened armor of someone who has sworn off intimacy, but the quiet solidity of someone who no longer needs to be completed. It is not a wall, it is a foundation. When you stand on it, the old fears lose their grip, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of not mattering to anyone, the fear of disappearing without an audience. These dissolve, not because you've proven yourself to the world, but because you've proven yourself to yourself. You begin to see how much of human connection is built on unspoken contracts. You will keep me from facing my emptiness, and I will keep you from facing yours. You will give me a sense of purpose, and I will give you a sense of worth. We will both agree to play our parts so neither of us has to confront the truth. When you've lived outside that contract long enough, you can no longer enter it blindly. You see the exchange for what it is, an agreement to maintain each other's illusions. And if you have walked through the deserts of your own mind and survived, you cannot return to that kind of bargain without a deep, quiet revolt in your soul. Jung knew that this revolt, this refusal to live in unconscious agreements, was dangerous in the eyes of the collective. A person who belongs to no one cannot be controlled by the same levers as everyone else. They do not respond to shame in the usual way. They are not seduced by flattery, nor threatened by withdrawal. They have seen what it costs to give away their center, and they will not pay that price again. But with this sovereignty comes a kind of aloneness that cannot be avoided. Not the loneliness of being unwanted, but the solitude of no longer needing to bend yourself to fit. You will watch people drift away not because they dislike you, but because they no longer recognize themselves in your reflection. The mirror you offer now is too honest, too unflattering to the image they want to keep. At first, this might sting. You might feel as though you've made yourself unreachable. But then you notice something unexpected. The connections that remain are clearer, truer, freer. You no longer attract those looking for a caretaker, a savior, or an emotional scaffold. You meet others who have stood in their own silence, who do not flinch at the truth, who know the difference between needing someone and choosing them. These meetings are rare, but they are alive. There is no pressure to be anything other than what you are in that moment. There is no silent bookkeeping of sacrifices made and debts owed. There is only presence, and in that presence, love becomes something far more powerful than possession. You see now why Jung placed such emphasis on the individual before the couple. The relationship between two individuated beings is not an escape hatch from solitude. It is an extension of it. Each remains whole, even in union. Each can walk away without losing themselves, and because of that, each stays not from fear of absence, but from love of the presence. But to reach that point, you must be willing to endure the long apprenticeship of aloneness, to strip away every false identity, every borrowed belief, every scripted reaction, to let your desires sharpen without rushing to fulfill them, to sit with the ache of being unseen and unvalidated until it no longer dictates your choices. This is why so many avoid the path, not because they do not want freedom, but because they cannot bear the cost of shedding what they have built to survive. It is easier to keep the marriage that suffocates than to face the nights alone. Easier to keep the relationship that dulls you than to face the raw possibility of an unmediated life. Yet there comes a point when the trade is no longer worth it, when the quiet death of your essence feels heavier than the fear of solitude, when you realize that no one else can carry the task of your becoming, no matter how much they love you. In that moment, the choice becomes clear. Even if it is painful, you step out of the roles, out of the agreements, out of the protective embrace of being someone's anything, and you become your own. From here, the work is not about building a fortress, but a sanctuary, a space where your own thoughts can stretch without interruption, where your own feelings can unfold without being explained away. It is in that sanctuary that your most dangerous ideas are born, the kind that refuse to fit inside the acceptable narratives of family dinners or polite conversation. And it is from that sanctuary that your deepest truths emerge, the ones you could never have spoken while living as someone else's half. You will still know moments of longing. You will still feel the pull toward connection. But the difference now is that you will not answer it out of desperation. You will answer only when it aligns with the truth you have fought to uncover. This is the essence of what Jung called the individuation process, the gradual, uncompromising alignment between who you are and how you live. It is not glamorous. It is not easy. But it is the only way to live a life that is truly yours. You begin to notice that the further you walk this path, the less you seek constant stimulation. The world's noise becomes a foreign language. Conversations that once felt necessary now seem hollow, like echoes from a life you no longer inhabit. Your attention sharpens. Your presence deepens. You no longer scatter yourself in 1,000 directions just to feel alive. In the silence, a different pulse emerges, not the rush of adrenaline you felt when someone new desired you, not the restless hum of wondering what others think, but a steady, grounded current that feels like it belongs to you alone. It is the rhythm of a self no longer divided against itself. Here, the idea of being single loses its edge. It is no longer a label that defines your social position, no longer a status that others measure against their own choices. It is simply the natural state of a person who refuses to bargain their truth for company. You see that the cultural fixation on relationships is not about love, but about predictability. A partnered life is easier for the collective to understand and control. A solitary life chosen consciously is unpredictable and therefore dangerous. Jung saw that danger as sacred, because unpredictability means freedom from the inherited script. It means the possibility of creating something entirely new, something born from your direct encounter with the unconscious rather than from recycled expectations. And that creation, whether it takes the form of art, ideas, or a way of living, can only emerge when you are willing to risk walking without a guide. The modern world disguises dependency as romance, compliance as harmony, and self-abandonment as love. It rewards those who adapt to the system's emotional economy, who trade authenticity for security and call it maturity. But once you've tasted the raw clarity of solitude, that trade feels poisonous. You would rather face the vast uncertainty of your own path than return to a life built on negotiated half-truths. This does not mean your days are without challenge. In fact, the challenges deepen, without someone else to soothe you in your weak moments. You must learn to hold yourself upright when everything in you wants to collapse, without someone to validate your worth. You must learn to see it clearly without reflection, without someone to distract you from your inner storms. You must walk straight into them and endure the lightning. But in that endurance, you uncover a truth few ever touch. You are far more capable than the world led you to believe. The strength you once outsourced to a partner was always yours. The comfort you thought they provided was simply the absence of your own presence. Now that you are fully here, you see that the foundation you stand on is unshakable because it is not borrowed. Your dreams change shape in this space. They are no longer about proving yourself, impressing anyone, or securing a place in someone's life. They become less about outcomes and more about expressions of your vision, your values, your depth. You are not chasing validation. You are answering a call that comes from somewhere beyond the reach of other people's approval. This is where the fire of creativity burns brightest. When you are no longer performing for an audience, your work becomes dangerous not in the sense of harm, but in its power to disrupt, to awaken, to unsettle the lies people live by. It is the same fire that fueled Jung's own explorations, that drove him to wander into the uncharted territories of the psyche without waiting for permission. And yet, there is a humility that comes with it, because you realize that this path is not about being untouchable or above the human need for connection. It is about refusing to confuse connection with captivity. It is about loving without ownership, giving without losing yourself, and receiving without obligation. This kind of love, rare as it is, can only be born between two people who have faced their own shadows and claimed their own wholeness. Anything less becomes a quiet transaction of needs disguised as devotion. When you meet someone from this place, you will know it. There will be no rush to merge, no panic at the thought of absence. There will be space. Space for each of you to keep your own orbit, your own silence, your own center. And in that space, intimacy becomes something infinitely richer than dependency. Until then, you walk alone not as a rejection of others, but as a devotion to the self you have fought to uncover. Every step away from the roles you once played is a step toward the life that is yours alone to live. And in the quiet hours, when doubt creeps in and the old fears whisper that you will regret this path, you will remember the life built on someone else's terms may offer comfort, but it will never offer truth. And truth, once tasted, is not something you can go back from. There comes a night when you feel the full weight of what you've chosen. The room is silent, the world outside moving on without you, and you realize that no one is coming to fill this space. No one to text you good night, no one to call and tell you the day will be better tomorrow. And in that moment, a wave of grief rises not for the absence of a person, but for the loss of the self you used to be, the one who always had someone to lean on, someone to distract from the quiet. You let the grief come. You let it pull you down into its depths, because you know now that resisting it would be another form of escape. And as it moves through you, something extraordinary happens. The fear that used to live inside this grief is gone. The pain is there. Yes, raw, honest, but the terror is missing. You are not afraid of being here. You are not afraid of the silence anymore. Jung would say that this is the threshold where solitude becomes fertile, where what once felt like emptiness begins to feel like potential, the unbroken ground in which something wholly your own can take root. It is here that your mind starts to reorganize itself, free from the constant adjustments required by shared life. Your values sharpen. Your desires become unmistakable. You begin to see the patterns you have lived by, the ones inherited without question, and you feel no obligation to keep them. The work of individuation is often described as a journey toward wholeness, but it is also a dismantling, a burning away of the scaffolding you built to hold up the image of yourself you thought was real. This burning is not romantic. It leaves you raw, stripped of familiar comforts, but it also leaves you light enough to move without the dead weight of pretense. From this stripped state, you start to understand why so many never make it here. It's not because they are weak, but because the culture has trained them to believe that their worth is inseparable from being chosen. To walk away from that belief is to walk into social exile. You will be misunderstood. You will be called distant, difficult, damaged. But these labels, once they no longer touch your truth, lose their power. You no longer need to be seen as good in order to be at peace. You no longer shape yourself to fit the collective's comfort. You have seen what it costs to be loved for a version of yourself that is not real, and you would rather be alone in your truth than adored for your mask. This is the kind of freedom that terrifies people, because it cannot be bargained with. The free person does not cling when threatened, does not flatter when cornered, does not dilute their voice to be understood. They live in a kind of inner authority that needs no external validation. And yet, this freedom does not make you untouchable. It makes you available in a way that is rare, because when you have nothing to prove, nothing to gain from someone's approval, you can meet them without the distortions of need, you can listen without defensiveness, speak without manipulation, love without the undercurrent of fear. Jung believed that such a state was not only possible, but necessary for any deep relationship. Without it, the bond will always be contaminated by the silent demand to be made whole by the other. With it, love becomes a choice that can be renewed daily, not a contract you cling to out of fear of the alternative. From here, you might find that relationships no longer occupy the center of your life, not because you've turned against them, but because they are no longer the axis around which your identity spins. The center is within you now, steady and unmoving, whether someone walks beside you or not. You see clearly how much energy you once spent maintaining harmony at the cost of honesty, how many dreams you shelved to avoid conflict, how much of your life was lived in reaction to another's moods, needs, and expectations, and you know with a quiet certainty that you will not return to that way of living. The path ahead is not without its challenges. You will still face moments when the old habits call you back, when it seems easier to compromise your truth than to endure another person's disappointment. But each time you choose yourself, the choice becomes less of a struggle and more of a reflex. Not the reflex of selfishness, but of self-loyalty. You start to understand, in your bones, that the greatest betrayal is not when someone leaves you. It is when you leave yourself. And the greatest act of love is to refuse that betrayal, even when the cost is high. In this way, remaining single at least for this season of your life is not a rejection of love, but a discipline, a practice of returning, again and again, to the source within you until it becomes the only place from which you live. When that happens, you stop fearing the empty bed, the solitary meal, the unshared holiday. You know that these are not signs of a life lacking. They are the signs of a life that is yours.
We are sold a fantasy, that this is the ultimate goal, that this is the definition of success, that this is the final chapter. We are taught from our very first fairy tale that we are incomplete, a half waiting for another half, that life is a quest, not for meaning, not for truth, but to find the one. This idea is embedded so deeply It is the silent engine running beneath all of our culture. It is in every song, every movie, every advertisement, and in the anxious, well-meaning questions of our families. Are you seeing anyone? The implication is clear: to be alone is to be in a state of failure, a temporary, unfortunate holding pattern before real life can begin. But what if this entire premise is a lie? What if this cultural obsession with the one is not a map to happiness, but a map to a gilded cage? What if the desperate search for someone else is the very thing preventing you from finding yourself? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, a man who stared unflinchingly into the abyss of the human mind, believed the ultimate goal of life wasn't partnership. It was individuation. It's an academic-sounding word, but its meaning is profound. It means to become whole, to become an individual, no longer divided. And he argued that the most crucial, painful, and transformative part of that journey must be done alone. This is why staying single, truly consciously single, might be the most courageous, radical, and important thing you can possibly do. Before we descend into the psyche, understand this: the ideas we're exploring today are challenging. They are not a comforting balm, they are a surgeon's scalpel. They will question the very foundations of what you've been taught about love, identity, and your own purpose. If you are ready for that journey of self-discovery, then subscribe. We do not offer easy answers here. We offer the right questions. Think about the last time you were truly alone, not just in between relationships, not in the first few weeks after a breakup, frantically texting friends to fill the void, not casually swiping on an app, keeping a roster of potential distractions simmering on the back burner. No, I mean truly alone. Weeks, perhaps months, with no romantic prospects, no validation from a potential partner, no one to text good morning or good night, no one else's energy in your space, just you, the silence, and the four walls of your own mind. What did it feel like? Be honest. Was it peaceful? Or was it terrifying? Did you feel a sense of calm, of freedom? Or did you feel a rising tide of anxiety, a phantom limb-like ache, an unbearable itch in your thumbs to check your phone, to post a story, to get a notification, a like, a comment, any sign that you are seen, that you exist? That feeling, that profound, agonizing discomfort in the silence, that is not just loneliness. That is a compass. It's pointing directly at the wound. It's showing you with perfect precision the work that needs to be done. Jung called the primary task of life individuation. It is the lifelong alchemical process of integrating all the conscious and unconscious parts of your mind into a single cohesive whole self. But in our modern world, we have perfected the art of avoiding this work. We have become masters of distraction, and our favorite, most socially acceptable distraction is love. We use other people as an escape from the terror of our own emptiness, an escape from the hard work of self-development. A relationship becomes a convenient place to hide. Think about the serial monogamist. The person who will not be single for more than a few weeks. The moment one relationship ends, they are already scanning the room, lining up the next one. They use another person's presence as a shield, a human shield, against having to ever look at themselves. If you are insecure, you find someone who makes you feel secure. If you feel boring, you find someone who is exciting. If you feel weak, you find someone who is strong. If you feel financially unstable, you find a provider. If you feel emotionally chaotic, you find a rock. You have outsourced your own development. You have handed the keys to your missing pieces to another person, making them responsible for your sense of self. You have in effect said, here, you hold this for me. You be my strength. You be my security. You be my excitement. And this, Jung would argue, is not love. It is codependency. It is psychic vampirism. The first step to breaking this cycle is the hardest. It's an act of defiance against your every instinct for comfort. You must choose solitude. You must willingly step into that empty room and turn on the lights. Because when you are finally truly single, there is no one left to blame. There is no one to distract you. There is no one to project onto. You are left alone with the one person you've been avoiding your entire life. You. And you are about to meet the darkest part of yourself. When you are alone, the shadow comes out to play. What is the shadow? It is everything you are, but pretend you are not. It is every part of yourself you have denied, repressed, and hidden, not just from the world, but from yourself. It is the locked basement of your psyche where you have thrown all the traits you were taught are bad, unlovable, or shameful. It's that surge of bitter, corrosive jealousy when your friend announces their engagement. It's that cold, biting, critical remark you make about a stranger's success. It's that profound, crippling laziness you feel, the one you hide with busyness. It's your insecurity, your pettiness, your arrogance, your rage, your deepest fears, your hidden perversions, your capacity for cruelty. The shadow is all the gold you've mistaken for garbage. Because the shadow isn't just bad, it's also your unlived life, your repressed creativity, your unspoken power, your wildness. When you are in a relationship, the shadow is easy to manage. You project it. Projection is an unconscious, automatic defense mechanism. You take a part of yourself you can't accept, and you see it as belonging to someone else. Your partner becomes a dumping ground for all the parts of yourself you refuse to own. Are you unconsciously lazy? You will become hypercritical of your partner's lack of ambition. Do you have a deep-seated fear of being controlled? You will see every request they make as a power grab. Are you secretly deeply needy? You will condemn them as clingy and suffocating at the slightest show of affection. Are you repressing your own anger? You will constantly accuse your partner of being angry or negative even when they are calm. Your partner becomes a mirror, but you think it's a window. You are in effect arguing with yourself, but you're yelling at them. This is the source of 90% of chronic relationship conflict. But, in solitude, the shadow has nowhere to go. It rebounds. It returns to its owner. You are forced to sit in that jealousy and finally ask, where does this come from? What part of me feels so lacking that I cannot celebrate another's joy? You are forced to confront your own insecurity and ask, why do I need constant external validation to feel worthy? Who am I trying to prove myself to? You are forced to own your anger, your fear, your pettiness, your laziness. This is the dark night of the soul you've heard about. It is brutal, agonizing work. It feels like a descent. You will feel like you are breaking down. You will feel ashamed. You will feel bad. But you are not breaking down. You are being disassembled. You are separating who you are from who you pretend to be. You are, in the alchemical language Jung loved, separating the lead from the gold. Being single doesn't create the shadow. It simply reveals it. It forces you to look in the mirror and finally integrate that dark reflection. You must own your darkness before you can ever truly own your light. This is the first non-negotiable step to becoming whole. You must find the courage to say, yes, I am jealous, I am weak, I am angry, I am all of those things. Only then, by owning them, can you begin to understand them and integrate their power rather than be ruled by them. But Jung's most radical idea about love goes even deeper. It explains the magic of romance and why that magic is the most dangerous illusion of all. Why do we fall in love so fast, so illogically, so completely? We call it chemistry. We call it fate. We say, I just knew. Jung called it projection. He argued that inside every man is an unconscious, idealized feminine image, the anima, and inside every woman is an unconscious, idealized masculine image, the animus. These are not real people. They are psychic blueprints built from our earliest experiences, our culture, our biology. The anima is the man's inner sense of the ideal woman. Perhaps she is the nurturing, soft earth mother. Perhaps she is the wild, elusive, creative muse. Perhaps she is the innocent, pure damsel in distress. The animus is the woman's inner sense of the ideal man. Perhaps he is the strong, decisive bad boy. Perhaps he is the intellectual, stable, wise provider. Perhaps he is the artistic, suffering, romantic hero. These are our inner types. When you fall in love at first sight, you are not seeing the actual person in front of you. You are not seeing their flaws, their complexities, their humanity. You are projecting your anima or animus onto them. They have become a blank screen for your inner movie. You are falling in love with a ghost, a missing, undeveloped part of yourself. You aren't in love with her. You're in love with your own unconscious idea of the nurturer because you haven't learned to nurture yourself. You aren't in love with him. You're in love with your own unconscious idea of the protector because you haven't found your own strength. This is why love at first sight is so intoxicating. It feels like magic. It feels like completion. You have finally found the missing part of you. But it's a lie. This is why so many relationships begin with this intoxicating perfect high and end in bitter disappointment. Eventually the projection shatters. It must shatter. Because no real flawed human being can live up to the weight of being your God, your savior, or your other half. The real flawed human being emerges from behind the mask you put on them. And what do we say? You've changed. You're not the person I fell in love with. Jung would say, correct. You never fell in love with them at all. You fell in love with your own projection. This is the great tragedy of modern romance. We are all just chasing ghosts, using real people as the screens. And in doing so, we damage them, and we rob ourselves of the chance to grow. So what happens when you are single? The projections are forced back home. They have no one to land on. This is the second crucial stage of the alchemical work. This is the integration. You can no longer search for a man who is strong and decisive to complete you. You must integrate your own animus. You must find that inner man and become strong and decisive yourself. You must learn to make your own decisions, to be your own provider, to be your own rock. You can no longer search for a woman who is creative and intuitive to complete you. You must integrate your own anima. You must find that inner woman and become creative and intuitive yourself. You must learn to be vulnerable, to be nurturing, to access your own feelings. You stop looking for it, and you start building it. This is what self-care truly means. It's not bubble baths and face masks. It is the grueling internal alchemical process of becoming your own partner, of developing the other within you. You learn to mother yourself. You learn to father yourself. You learn to protect, nurture, and challenge yourself. You learn to set your own boundaries. You learn to validate your own feelings. You are quite literally making yourself whole. You are becoming the parent you always wanted. You are becoming the partner you always needed. And slowly, painstakingly, something new is forged. The person who went into this journey dies, and someone new is born from the ashes. And slowly, the silence in that empty apartment stops being terrifying. It becomes clear. It becomes full. It becomes peace. The anxiety fades. The desperate itch to be seen is gone. You realize you are not a half waiting to be completed. You never were. You were a complete circle, just one that didn't know its own shape. You build a life that you genuinely love, not as a waiting room for a future partner, but as a palace built for you. You fill it with your own purpose, your own passions, your own principles, your own friends. You stop needing someone. You simply are. You become your own source of joy, your own source of stability, your own source of validation. And this is the great paradox of Jungian psychology. The only people who are truly ready for a healthy relationship are those who no longer need one. A healthy relationship is not two broken halves clinging to each other to make a whole. It is two whole individuals, two complete sovereign circles, choosing to walk side by side, to share their abundance, not their lack. When you are whole, you stop being attracted to projects, fixer-uppers, or saviors. You are no longer drawn to chaos or codependency because your own inner house is finally in order. You will for the first time be able to see another person for who they actually are, not for who you need them to be. You can love them for their humanity, not for their ability to fill your void. This is conscious love. It is a choice, not a need. So why is staying single the best thing you can do? Because it is not a rejection of love. It is a rejection of dependency. It is not an act of loneliness. It is an act of profound self-love. It is not a waiting period. It is the great work. It is the hardest, most courageous work you will ever do to stop searching the world for your other half. And finally dare to become whole all by yourself. And the strangest part, when you finally reach that place, when you are so complete within yourself that you no longer need anyone at all, that is precisely when you will be ready to attract someone who is also whole. The journey of individuation is a personal one. Where are you on this path? What part of the shadow or projection resonated most with you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience is part of a larger conversation.